Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to PURA's inaugural webinar featuring our first ever annual report. The annual report features information from calendar year 2022. We did touch on a few continuing themes that we expect to see in calendar year 2023. But the data information and insights we're sharing here today are meant to update everyone with respect to the activities of PURA in calendar year 2022. My name is Chairman Marissa Gillett, and I'm going to be joined today by a number of our colleagues here at PURA. Hopefully by now you've had the chance to meet a number of our excellent staff here. I'm going to be joined explicitly today by PURA's Managing Director of Technical Staff, Josh Ryor, who I will turn it over in just a few minutes. So I want to start by saying, we really appreciate everyone's time and attention this morning. Over the past couple of years, PURA, I think, has made a really concerted effort to be more transparent at the same time while holding our regulated utilities more transparent. I personally believe that our job is fundamentally at the core to hold the utilities accountable. And because we're requiring that and demanding that of the regulated utilities, it also requires that PURA hold ourselves accountable and provide transparency as well as an inclusive process for stakeholders to be aware of what we're doing at PURA on a day-to-day basis, and also how you can get involved in our proceedings. We view today's webinar and as well as the annual report on which it's based to be a vital step in achieving this objective. Hopefully you've also had the opportunity to review some of our quarterly newsletters. That is also a new initiative for PURA, and we will look forward to continuing that just moving forward. So for today's purposes, I'll just start the agenda really quickly. We are going to start with the purpose and sector overviews. Like I said, I'm going to turn it over to our managing director to go through the purpose and sector overviews. I am going to wrap us up today with an overview of the activities that PURA's Office of Education, Outreach, and Enforcement conducted in 2022, as well as cover a couple of the other resources that we're putting together and that were appended to this report. So to begin, I do want to start with just a brief overview of PURA. I imagine that many of you that are joining us today are frequent flyers, frequent stakeholders at PURA. But if this is new to you, just want to level set by reiterating that PURA is the independent regulator with respect to the regulated utilities in this state. So what does that mean? It means that we are focused on investor-owned utilities in the electric, water, and gas space. So by investor-owned, I mean privately held companies that have shareholders. So we're talking Eversource, United Illuminating, their gas affiliates, Yankee, CNG, SCG. And in the water space, we're referring to investor-owned utilities such as Aquarion, Connecticut Water, and a few others. We also have some jurisdiction, albeit more limited in the telecommunications space, as well as respect to gas pipeline safety and electric suppliers. Importantly, PURA is a quasi-judicial agency. Many of you have heard me harp on this before. The real importance of understanding what we mean when we say quasi-judicial, and the real driver behind today's presentation is that when PURA makes a decision, we are much like similar to a court, where we can only make decisions based on the evidence that is put into the record before us, and it must be substantial evidence. So the decisions that you will hear us recap this morning are decisions that we reached based on what was put before us. Those decisions may have been similar, they may have been very different had we had a more diverse set of stakeholders in front of us. So we look forward to encouraging your engagement in future proceedings. Next slide, please. So briefly, if you are new to PURA or maybe you've been interacting with PURA for years, we have undergone a pretty significant organizational structure shift in the couple of years that I've been here. So we thought it was important to pause and familiarize you with the structure of PURA. So as you can see, I'm the chair of the agency. I have two colleagues, Michael Karen and Vice Chairman Jack Bukowski, and together the three of us are the commissioners of PURA. Importantly, any decisions that we make must be made by a majority of the commissioners. PURA is organized into 5 offices that are shown on the screen here. I will go into more detail with respect to the Office of Education, Outreach, and Enforcement toward the end, as it is one of our newer offices. That office is led by Director Tom Lopez, who I hope many of you have had the opportunity to meet, because he is doing a fantastic job at that office. And I thank him for all of his work. Also, many of you, particularly our legislative colleagues who are on the line, will be familiar with Taryn O'Connor. Taryn has a big portfolio in front of her. She's our Director of Legislation and Communications. So you'll interact with her on both of those fronts. Our General Counsel, Scott Muska, is also on the line, who is responsible for the administrative and operations of the agency, generally serving as our legal advisor over all the materials. We also have Stephen Cadwalader, who is the director of the Office of Federal, Regional, and Wholesale Affairs, who leads PURA's work interacting with other state agencies on matters of regional and federal work. And finally, our newest office is the Office of Technical and Regulatory Analysis. That is led by our very capable managing director, Josh Ryor, who is going to walk you through a lot of the information today. Josh has responsibility for roughly half of our staff here, and his office covers all of the decisional technical staff. So many, if not the majority of the docketed work flows directly through his office. So I am going to turn it over to him in just one more moment to walk us through the balance of the presentation today. But before I do so, I do want to acknowledge those directors, as well as each of their supervisors that report to them and their staff. Without these directors, the work that we're presenting to you today would not have been possible. So I really want to pause and acknowledge everything that they have done to contribute to not just this agency, but really the ratepayers of Connecticut. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Josh, our Managing Director of Technical Staff, to begin walking through the substance of the presentation. So again, thank you for joining me. Josh. Josh, just want to make sure you can hear me.
All right, great. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. My apologies for the technical difficulties there. Hopefully I was frozen in a not an unflattering pose. So great. So let's go ahead and get into the substance of this report. So as you would expect in any annual report, it's really an inventory of the work that PURA did in 2020. It provides summaries of key decisions. It's also, if you had the opportunity yet to go to the website that we've created for it, is broken down by sectors, so it's in digestible chunks if you have an interest in one particular sector or just want to see some of the key stats that we have in a fact sheet as well. It also provides some updates on some key dockets like our performance-based regulation proceeding and provides resources to stakeholders in addition to just the decisions that hopefully will be helpful in engaging the public. And this last point is really the most important, is the importance of, and as I'm sure you'll see as you go through the report. Obviously, it takes time and effort to compile all of this, but it's really a vital information to help educate the public to improve awareness of what PURA and all the stakeholders that work with us on the decisions that we put out and make sure we get it. There's a good product for the ratepayers of Connecticut to increase awareness and also to help increase participation in PURA proceedings. As the chairman said, our decisions are based on the record and the testimony that we that others provide in our proceedings. So really participation is vital to good decisions coming out of PURA. So before we get into kind of some of the nitty gritty, we wanted to share with you some key numbers from 2022. So all the way on the left, you'll see kind of stakeholder engagement by the numbers. And roughly, when you'll see the opportunities for written comments, technical meetings, and hearings, very roughly that equates to one opportunity for written comments or and conversely from PURA's perspective, one set of written comments from a variety of stakeholders that we receive essentially once a week. Again, also essentially once a week, we'd have a technical meeting, and a little over once a week, we would have a hearing. So in a given week, about 3 different, on average, touch points with stakeholders across all of the sectors that I'll talk about here today. And that's in addition to the numerous PURA 101 workshops and different public engagement events, including night listening sessions that PURA put on in 2022. Looking at the middle here, PURA issued 115 decisions in 2022. So that's roughly 2 decisions per week. As folks that follow us know, that those are adopted and voted on by the commissioners, typically at a regular meeting on Wednesday every week. So roughly 2 of those decisions per week. PURA has, just for some context, 70 total staff, but only about 30 of those staff actually work on the decisions that are listed here. And if you go all the way to the right with some of the key facts and looking at 2,000 total pages of analysis in the decisions, you divide that across 30 decisional staff, that's roughly 70 pages from each, written by each decisional staff member in the last year. So you'll also see, in addition to the 115 decisions, we had 366 dockets that were open, so roughly 1 a day, and over 1,000 motion rulings. So certainly those 70 pages of that were written by decisional staff is not just, there's more than that in motion rulings and other things. So it's roughly, right, it's essentially 4 motion rulings per business day. But the other key stats that we wanted to highlight is that in 2022, roughly $16 million in fines were issued. And you can see that they're broken down here between electric suppliers, call before you dig, the electric utilities and pipeline safety. And also sometimes they're, sometimes they're fines, sometimes they're restitution. So all of that is included in the $16 million. So certainly those are, there wasn't one fine for 16 million. There's lots of individual work that went into that, both on the decisional side and certainly a lot of work on the Office of Education Outreach and Enforcement side, which the chairman will get into at the end. Great, so as the agenda listed earlier, the key sections in the 2022 PURA annual report are listed here in this graphic. I'll go over the ones that relate to decisional staff, which is made up of, when I say decisional staff, it's the staff that worked on the docketed proceedings before the authority and worked on the decision part of those dockets, which include my technical staff and the Office of Technical and Regulatory Analysis, as well as a handful of very capable and competent adjudicators, attorneys rather, that work side by side with us on those decisions. So I'll go over rate cases, updates, grid modernization updates, electric sector, natural gas, water, and telecom updates. Before I do that, I just want to really piggyback on the comments that the chairman made earlier, that certainly the chairman and myself are providing an update here today, but this work isn't possible without the supervisors and their staff that work on these decisions. So I just wanted to acknowledge and highlight the 6 units quickly that really were involved and led all of the work that I'm going to walk through here in a second. So the Office of Technical and Regulatory Analysis is made up of these 6 units: the Clean and Affordable Energy Unit, the Reliability, Security, and Resilience Unit, the Utility Performance Analysis Unit, the Revenue Requirements Unit, Gas Pipeline Safety, which also has Call Before You Dig, as well as our Strategy and Operations Unit. So my sincere thanks and gratitude for all their hard work, and certainly, as you saw with the by the numbers, lots of work was done by all these individuals and their staff. Great. So to provide a quick update on where we're at with the rate cases that came in 2022. So we had 2 that were submitted, as folks probably are aware, or at least saw in the newspaper. One was submitted by the Aquarian Water Company, and the hearings for that rate application were held in December. And the decision outlined the statutory deadline is March 17th for that docket. You'll see that on the right there, but is actually planned for a final decision on March 15th for folks. And we'll put these slides on the website as well. So for folks that want to go to the website and see more for this precise schedule, you can see that. And we also in 2022 received an application from United Illuminating Company to amend their rates. And you can see here between Aquarian and United Illuminating, these rate applications would affect over 500,000 customers in over 70 towns in Connecticut. So certainly not a small impact, and something that we take seriously. So in terms of the timing of the United Illuminating rate case, the hearings actually for that will start tomorrow, and the statutory deadline for PURA's decision is August 25th. So you can look out for that towards the end of the summer. And before I move on, so the real takeaway there is those rate cases are ongoing. You'll see a decision out of PURA in 2023. As you've probably heard in the media or through legislative testimony that PURA has provided, really rate cases are a vital regulatory tool to ensuring just and reasonable rates and to holding the utilities accountable, as the chairman started this presentation off with today. So really these are vital proceedings before the authority. And we anticipate more from some of our larger utilities in 2023. So certainly we'll keep all stakeholders up to date on that. And for those that are interested in learning more or learning how to get involved with rate cases, or even just how they work, PURA staff have pulled together a series of tutorials on how to get involved, what a rate case is, that you can link there and are also on our YouTube, are linked here rather, and are also on the Connecticut PURA YouTube. Great. So moving on from, and as you'll notice, for those that have looked up the annual report, our presentation today mirrors the sections that are included there. So we're walking through that one by one. So the first section was an update on rate cases, which I just provided. And the second section is an update on our grid modernization dockets. Back in 2019, the authority issued a framework for an equitable modern grid, or the equitable modern grid framework, which laid out 4 objectives for a modern grid. And really what the thinking behind that was, if in concert we deliver on the promise of an equitable modern grid, we will achieve these 4 outcomes or objectives that are listed here, which is to support Connecticut's green economy, to enable a cost-effective economy-wide transition to decarbonization, to enhance customer access to a more secure, reliable, and resilient commodity, and to advance energy affordability for customers. Not just obviously the conversation around rates is front and center right now, but also to empower customers more so that they can take greater control of their own energy expenditures. We've made great progress over the last several years since this framework was issued in October of 2019. We've actually completed 9 out of the 11 dockets that we opened as part of this framework that, again, in concert should achieve those 4 objectives. A rough timeline of each of those proceedings is here on the right. You can see the 2 that we still have work to do on are our 2nd and 10th proceedings, one on AMI in the state of Connecticut, and really looking at a statewide plan for advanced metering infrastructure in Connecticut. And then RE10, which looks at really the building blocks of resource adequacy, specifically when it comes to supply, and it's obviously timely when it comes to thinking about standard service procurements and how customers for both of our electric utilities receive power. So moving on, what I really want to talk about with grid modernization is, in addition to just that great progress that we've made on 9 of the 11 dockets, is the specific progress that we made in 2022. Early in 2022, we authorized and established a new program called the Innovative Energy Solutions Program that's really with the mindset of trying to break this cycle of pilots that we've had really across the nation in testing new products. It's not just to pilot something, but really to pilot something with the end goal of providing ratepayers with value at scale. So let's pilot something, yes, but to make sure that we're actually not just benefiting a few folks with those pilots, but actually have a system in place to take learnings from the pilots, to apply it elsewhere, but hopefully to actually scale up solutions that provide greater benefits to ratepayers, particularly when we're talking about some of our unsolved climate goals, whether or not we currently have the technologies to get there cost effectively. Certainly this program will help us explore whether or not there are technologies that will help us get there faster or more cost effectively. We also established a new framework for allowing what are called non-wire solutions, to be able to be competitive against wire solutions. And what do we mean by that? When I say wire solutions, when there's new load, when there's additional load in Connecticut, that's often met with a wires. The utilities have to meet that need with a wire solutions often, at least traditionally. And so what that means is, upgrading poles, substations, really traditional utility infrastructure. But we're seeing more and more that there's an opportunity for non-wire solutions like battery storage, solar plus battery storage, fuel cells, to be able to provide those same solutions potentially more cost effectively and with greater benefits to customers. So this set up a framework to really allow for the competition between wire solutions and non-wire solutions, so that ratepayers, regardless of what the solution is, maybe it is the wire solutions more often than not, but regardless, we have confidence that competition is taking place and that ratepayers are always benefiting from the most cost-effective solution. In our 8th track, we also, and to be clear, both of those, the Innovative Energy Solutions Program and the non-wire solutions process were actually authorized in 2022 and will be moving forward in the coming years. Similarly, we also authorized in Ryo 8 a new resilience and reliability framework that's really aimed at reducing the costs of providing resilience and reliability and doing a more specific and detailed accounting of the benefits of different measures. I'm sure folks have heard a lot about vegetation management, and certainly those efforts provide great value in terms of reliability, but thinking critically about what are the measures that most cost effectively provide increased reliability and resilience to customers. So we set about a framework that we'll use to evaluate that in the years to come. We also, in the very early stages of 2022, authorized a new annual docket for all of our data for our clean and renewable energy programs that the utilities administer and thus PURA oversees. And you can see on the right here, our first annual report was issued in February of 2022 that provided all of this data. And moving forward, actually in a docket that'll always be the year number 0801, we'll have consolidated data on all of the programs that'll be updated annually, and we'll also issue a report. And I'm happy to say that next Wednesday, the 22nd, we'll be issuing our second annual clean and renewable energy report. And there's already a draft available in docket number 220801. So folks that are interested and want to take a look at what that might look like, please feel free. And last but certainly not least, in RE11, we also authorized in 2022 a new two-tiered low-income discount rate for certain residential customers. The different tiers are eligibility tiers, one for folks that are of lower income and one for folks that still qualify as low income but not aren't quite as low income, I guess, definitionally. And so it's different tiers of discounts, and that will take effect in 2024. Great. So moving on to some of the decisions and progress that was made in 2022 in the electric sector. I just want to pause and say, obviously, most of the work that I just highlighted in grid mod also is electric sector. So we're just separating it a little bit topically within the electric sector. And one of the reasons for that, as you can see with these stats here, is that the electric industry regulated by PURA is the largest sector that we regulate in terms of revenue. And certainly it has a large number of customers. About 90% of all electric ratepayers in Connecticut are served by either Eversource or United Illuminating, the others of which are served by municipal electric utilities. So some of the key topics that we saw in 2022, of course, electric supply costs and the volatility we've seen there. But also we have annual rate adjustment mechanisms that are becoming more and more, I guess popular is one word for it, but certainly a lot of expenses flow through these different mechanisms, including many public policy related costs. And so there's essentially these annual, somewhat like rate cases that the authority goes through. And you can see the two that we went through in 2022 on the right at the top. 220103 and 220104 that really dives in and does an accounting of not only the reconciliation between what rates were charged in the prior calendar year and any reconciliation that needs to be done against actual expenses and revenues, but also looks at the prudence of those costs and looks back to make sure that all of those costs were reasonable and prudent. And we also continued the progress that we've made and really kicked off our phase one in our performance-based regulation process, which I'll transition to now. I want to talk a little bit more about, because I'm sure folks that are on the line have heard this talked about in the newspaper, at the legislature, and is really for the authority and for authority staff, a really key focus, not only now, but moving forward, is performance-based regulation, because I think what we've certainly heard publicly and we've experienced with our stakeholders through various dockets is this disconnect, this seeming disconnect that stakeholders feel between the outcomes associated with electric service and what they're hoping for from that. So really, what performance-based regulation is seeking to achieve at a very high level is to better align the utility's service and operations with the expectations of consumers and the public policy of the state. So in terms of the progress that we've made in 2020, essentially the entire calendar year of 2022, we embarked on what we called phase one of our PBR process, which was really focused on establishing the goals and the outcomes associated with utility performance, that not only that we wanted to design any performance-based mechanisms around, but really what the goals and outcomes should be that we should be regulating around. Certainly there's 100 years worth of experience in terms of what the intention and objectives are of utility regulation, but we wanted to reset that, particularly in light of a lot of the dynamic and the dynamic and recent changes rather that we've experienced in not only the energy industry, but within the utility industry across the nation. So really resetting that again for the PBR process, but also as a foundation moving forward. So we all know not only as PURA, but as stakeholders, what are the goals and outcomes that each of the proceedings that we have in front of us are trying to achieve and further. So we issued essentially PURA staff's perspective on that on January 25th through the phase 1 straw proposal. We subsequently had a stakeholder workshop where we provided an overview of that and also heard from stakeholders, not only their input on phase 1, but more importantly, really what their vision for PBR is and what they think the value of PBR is and what it can provide to the state of Connecticut. The comments actually on the staff straw proposal are due later today. So apologies to some of you for taking you away from those comments. And then PURA plans to issue a draft decision for phase 1 in about a month, and then in about a month after that, the commissioners plan on voting on that decision. So you can look forward to those additional steps. I will just say that as part of this phase 1 decision, we'll be proposing or actually outlining in the decision what we're calling phase 2 will look like, which is really where the design and implementation of PBR related mechanisms will occur. So we're really looking forward to really digging in with stakeholders on that, having a collaborative process moving forward in phase 2 to make sure that we're developing these mechanisms in concert with stakeholders, because certainly that's the intention of PBR, largely from our perspective, is to better align utility service and operations with public expectations, as I previously mentioned. Great. So two things we want to highlight in the natural gas sector that came up in 2022. The first is just the great work that is done by our gas pipeline safety unit and call before you dig units. You can see here over 1,000 days or 1,000 inspections, 72 violations, over $5 million in penalties issued. So that work continues and will continue into the future as obviously the safety of gas pipelines and just call before you dig are vital to the state. So that, as I said, work continues and is a focus point for the authority and its staff. And then in terms of docketed work, I think the major one to highlight is the fact that the natural gas expansion plan was wound down by the authority in docket 210804. So for more details on that, you can certainly visit that decision. But the one note for folks that are in the weeds on a lot of our reconciliation mechanisms, the SER that reconciles the SEP, so the system expansion plan related revenues, will continue and as it did in 2022, where we looked at the 2021 expenses, but also set moving forward the hurdle rate at a 15-year payback period. So for more context on what all that means, certainly please, we'd encourage you to visit the decisions that are hyperlinked here. Great. Moving to the water sector, I think an important thing to highlight, and certainly the annual report lays this out and provides this additional context, is that the water resources in Connecticut are jointly overseen by not just PURA, but our partners at DEEP and the Department of Public Health. And PURA's role in that is ensuring, really looking at the rates and in making sure that they encourage conservation and responsible water use. A couple of key trends to highlight for folks that are familiar with the water infrastructure conservation adjustments. Those continue. Not all of the reconciliations that we had this year are listed under major dockets. They're all included in the annual reports. So that mechanism continues from our perspective to be used. And then also we've seen this continued trend of water sector really the mergers and acquisition, the consolidation of the water sector. And so we had two dockets listed here at the bottom of the major dockets for that had decisions in 2022, although some of them are listed as years prior. Connecticut Water acquired Miami Beach, and that was approved in 2022. And Aquarian Water Company merged with the Torrington Water Company, which was also approved in 2022. Great, and then the final sector that I'll cover before I hand it back to the chairman is really telecommunications, and we've put utility poles with telecommunications for the purposes of this report. And so, as the chairman mentioned at the outset, we have some limited role in the regulation of that industry, but certainly we have a role in regulating policies and rates related to utility poles. So several of the dockets that you'll see on the right for this year include policies that are related to utility poles, and also are designed to facilitate the deployment of the safe deployment of broadband and other telecommunications infrastructure in the state. And so on the right, you'll see one of the dockets that we set up this year was a one-touch make-ready process for pole attachments to help with the efficient deployment, again, of pole attachments and broadband infrastructure in the state of Connecticut. We also identified as one thing that I'm sure folks that have just driven around have seen before, are compromised poles or poles that might look compromised. We've established a more standardized process for identifying and addressing those compromised poles, and really have strict timelines now to make sure that those poles are inspected and made safe for the safety not only of the public, but of utility workers as well. And we also approved a pilot program for single transfer to remedy double poles situations. Is another thing that I'm sure folks that have driven around your town, you'll see double poles. Sometimes it's just a matter of all of the facilities on the pole have not been moved yet. And so certainly we have an interest in making sure that that process is done efficiently and cost effectively. So we approved a pilot program to help alleviate the number of double poles that folks see out there. And then lastly, although this doesn't technically count as a decision that went out in 2022, did occur before today's webinar, so I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, that last week on February 8th, PURA adopted a decision that developed a process for the construction of conduit excavation by broadband and other telecommunication providers in public rights of way. And one of the objectives, and that's related to Public Act 21-159, and one of the objectives of that public act and what was delegated to PURA was making sure that we're efficiently excavating, and that telecommunication and broadband providers are sharing excavations where it makes sense. So we've set out a process for that to be done moving forward. With that, I'll turn it back to the chairman to finish off the webinar and talk through the rest of what is in the annual report.
Thank you very much, Josh. So we are going to move to the slide that covers section 7 of the report, please. So in section 7 of the annual report, we do detail the activities of the Office of Education Outreach and Enforcement, or EOE for short. EOE was an office that was created as part of the reorganization of PURA staff that I completed in July of 2020. So the reason that EOE is so unique and that we hope it is a boon to particularly our non-traditional stakeholders is that EOE is a division of staff that while they are trained to be regulators by PURA and they have access to the same training materials, they are not subject to the traditional ex parte prohibitions in the way that PURA commissioners and staff are. So just to reacquaint folks with what it means for what ex parte means, it means that for the purposes of a docket that is pending before PURA or is likely to be pending before PURA in the near future, PURA commissioners and decisional staff are not permitted to discuss the substance of the matter or speculate about how the authority is going to decide a matter outside of the confines of the traditional hearing process. And that's for the protection of the due process rights of everyone involved. And what it means in practicality is that there are no closed doors meetings. Everything is done through a public facing process, be it the discovery process where we're exchanging questions through the docket, or the evidentiary hearings that are held publicly, such as the ones starting Thursday with UI, where we are going to be holding those hearings in person, but they are viewable by the public through our YouTube channel. So notably, EOE are not subject to those ex parte prohibitions. So the staff that are assigned to EOE under Director Lopez are free to communicate freely with members of the public, with a huge emphasis on non-traditional stakeholders. And the purpose of that was that the work that we have delegated to EOE, particularly around licensing and certification, are traditionally, are usually routinely licenses and certifications that are being filed by folks that don't interact with us on a daily basis. So whether that's someone who has solar on their roof and wants to get a certification to generate class 1 recs, whether it's a landlord who's trying to file a sub-metering application, whether it's an individual who's objecting to a small cell tower, for example, all of those types of applications and licenses and requests for certification, they are filed with the authority and they're assigned docket numbers. But we delegate the initial review of the matter to EOE so that the staff assigned there can have free-flowing conversations with members of the public to help them complete the applications in a timely way and answer questions about how to engage with us. So based on the number of certifications and licenses that we were able to timely review and issue last year, we think that this process is working. An additional obligation or delegation of authority to EOE is that we look to them to be our first and foremost mediation and enforcement unit, of course, outside of the gas pipeline safety unit. So when we're talking about mediation and enforcement here, a lot of the work that they've done over the past couple of years has focused on cleaning up the third-party electric supplier market, which we're really grateful for because I think, given current circumstances, where we are looking, at third-party offers that are, cheaper than standard service, we really feel comfortable recommending to folks that they go to energizect.com and shop for electric provider because there has been so much great work done to clean up that market in conjunction with our partners in the legislature, passing very needed consumer protection regulations, as well as work from the AG's office and OCC. So last year, in particular, there was a number of settlements and restitution ordered, and EOE also supports our work in rate cases, particularly when it comes to areas that are within their expertise of dealing with customer complaints. Because the third major area that EOE focuses on is direct interaction with the public. So you may have heard me describe that we have a call center. There are 4 staff assigned directly to the call center. Those 4 staff were able to process almost 13,000 customer complaints last year, inquiries. And besides the restitution that we were able to secure through supplier enforcement issues, there are often one-off, restitution or customer credits that are negotiated by our call center reps as they're looking through specific circumstances of that customer's inquiry. And that work resulted in $100,000 in the aggregate that was returned to customers as part of that complaint resolution process just last year. The final area that EOE is most actively focused on is we have started using working groups. Again, working groups are historically difficult for the authority because there was not a vehicle by which the authority could directly participate because of all ex parte prohibitions. So with the formation of EOE, we are able to delegate the facilitation of these working groups to members of PURA that are situated within EOE. So a couple of those working groups that they facilitate, for example, is our newly formed vegetational management working group, which was an outcrop of our grid modernization decision last year. They also facilitate our distribution generation working groups, which focus on policy and technical improvements to our interconnection processes. So importantly, each of these working groups are very structured. They have charters, they have transparent agendas and meetings, very defined scopes of work, and they're also another avenue for you or your constituents or stakeholders to funnel feedback to the authority. So the final slide that we want to cover today is section 8 and 9 of the report, the annual report, focus on updates that we completed in 2022 in two important areas. As you know, we are as you may know, PURA is a creature of statute, which means that we derive all of our authority from the legislature. And often that results in us opening dockets to look into something or to create a program. It can also look like asking PURA to serve on task forces or working groups. For example, one example that we pulled out from 2022 was our participation in the legislative task force on hydrogen. Another example that we have recently completed is the work that we contributed to the solid waste management working group on the subtask of waste to energy. And the full annual report provides updates on other legislative directives that we were asked to complete in 2022. The final section of the report covers updates on appeals. As you may have heard me mention on other venues, there are a number of appeals pending of PURA decisions. So PURA as a quasi-judicial body, operating like a court, when we issue decisions in a docket, they are legally binding on the entities that we regulate. And if the decision affects that entity's rights, particularly around the rates area, they are permitted to appeal that decision to Superior Court. And there have been a number of instances in which those utilities are appealing our decisions as of late. So the decision points out in detail the status and the subject of each of those appeals. In each of the appeals, PURA has taken some action to disallow cost recovery, sometimes for a significant amount, and the utility has challenged our ability to do so on different statutory premises. So the example that we pulled out here for your awareness is the decision that we issued in Tropical Storm Isaias, which levied fines and ROE reductions on both Eversource and UI. Initially, both companies had filed appeals. Eversource's appeal was withdrawn as a condition of the settlement that was negotiated in 2021. However, UI's appeal progressed. They were on the basis of the appeals were on very similar, if not identical, legal reasons, particularly arguing the utilities have argued that PURA does not have the authority to issue both a civil penalty and an ROE reduction among utility-specific challenges to the evidence that we had to support the fines that we levied. Importantly, as I would have expected it to be, based on the thorough job we did in that case with the support of our stakeholders, the Superior Court in the fall upheld PURA's decision on all counts, affirming us in all areas with respect to that decision. UI has filed a notice of appeal, and that has been transferred to the Connecticut Supreme Court, where it is pending currently. So there will be an update on that appeal in next year's annual report. So with that, we have reached the conclusion of our presentation today. If you haven't had a chance to review the report, it is over 100 pages, and we could have gone on for several hundred more detailing the work that we've done last year. And as Josh has already mentioned, we would commend to you the supplemental report focused more specifically on the clean and renewable energy sectors and updates from last year. So we look forward to providing a similar update on this time next year with respect to the work that we are already undertaking in 2023. And again, we would encourage you to look out for our quarterly newsletters, which focus a little bit on key decisions from the last quarter, as well as flagging to you dockets for the upcoming quarter that we think are of interest to stakeholders. So with that, we are close to the top of the hour. There is a functionality to enter questions. I do not see any at this time. I'm happy to pause here and see if folks want to take a few minutes to enter questions. And if not, we are always happy to connect after today's webinar to address specific questions that we did not get to today. Again, I want to thank Josh Ryor. Also really want to thank Julia Demain for her work on this report. And we'll just pause here to see if there are any questions that are entered. All right, we're not seeing any. So thank you to everyone for attending this morning's webinar. We will make the recording available. And again, the annual report is already up on our website, segregated by sections, as well as our executive summary. So thank you so much for your attention this morning. And we really look forward to continuing to engage with you throughout this legislative session and the next year. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.